The Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Emergency Management and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the subcommittee may recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to examine disaster mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery in coastal communities. I thank Southern University at New Orleans and Ranking Member Carter for hosting the subcommittee today. I recognize myself for an opening statement. I first want to begin by thanking our witnesses for participating in this hearing today. I look forward to hearing more about your work to help communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from natural disasters and other events that impact coastal communities. Thank you for your decision to work in this field. As a retired NYPD detective and former chief of the Island Park Fire Department, I know that working in emergency management isn't always glamorous, and it's often a thankless job. But I want to tell you that your work and our work does matter. Thank you for serving and for being on the front lines in people's greatest times of need. We talked about it yesterday. It brings out some of the very worst in people, but individuals like you, it brings out the very best. While we work hard to protect our communities from environmental hazards, many of us have seen firsthand how powerful hurricanes may leave unspeakable destruction in their wake. In the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, I was serving as chief of my hometown in Island Park, and will never forget the sense of dire need that followed. An estimated 100,000 homes were damaged or destroyed on Long Island alone, but we worked hand in hand, arm in arm, with FEMA to rebuild our community. As members of the Subcommittee on Emergency Management and Technology, it is important that we examine how state and local governments coordinate with federal agencies such as FEMA and the SBA to help coastal communities mitigate the unique challenges they face and prepare for potential emergencies. When the scale of an emergency is beyond what state can handle, the federal government must coordinate effectively with state officials and local first responders who are already on the ground and who know their communities best. I look forward to evaluating not only the federal response to natural disasters and FEMA's long-term recovery programs, but also how local partners are collaborating to build resiliency and mitigate the impacts of natural disasters. Historic storms have become too common in recent years, and coastal communities must consider how to harden their defenses and become more resilient in anticipation of future storms. We can't only focus on disaster recovery, we have to ensure that our infrastructure is able to withstand the next storm. Doing so will prevent continued destruction from happening. It is estimated that every $1 invested in hazard mitigation, $6 is saved in disaster recovery. Billions of federal dollars have been appropriated for hazard mitigation projects under Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. I am pleased that there have been many efforts to improve vulnerable communities' access to federal grant funding, and I look forward to learning more about how Louisiana is utilizing these funds. In fact, the enacted Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 authorized FEMA to incentivize states to take responsibility for their own emergency preparedness through allowing states that proactively funded hazard mitigation before the disaster to qualify for increased federal funding after a disaster. Considering how critical disaster preparedness and resiliency are for coastal communities across the nation, I hope to learn more about resiliency projects in Louisiana and how communities are taking advantage of opportunities available to them. FEMA also hosts a multitude of preparedness grants as well as hazard mitigation assistance grants to support first responders and protect people and property from future disasters in highly at-risk communities. These grants play an important role in helping police and fire departments improve public safety and strengthen communities' defenses against extreme weather events. Since state governments and local nonprofits are the first to respond, states should maintain and strengthen their state of preparedness to avoid becoming dependent on FEMA in the aftermath of a storm. However, we must also ensure that federal assistance is available to those who truly need it most. Should a catastrophic event occur in the future, effective federal, state, and local coordination is essential for our national preparedness and response. As such, the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006 was enacted specifically to address failures during Hurricane Katrina and to improve FEMA's role in our national emergency management and training. Earlier this year, this subcommittee heard from emergency management professionals and practitioners about some of the difficulties that survivors face in applying the individual assistance and for individual assistance. I look forward to hearing about how we can simplify and improve vulnerable communities' access to statewide resources, as well as FEMA's Individual Assistance Program and SBA's Disaster Loan Program in the aftermath of storms. I would like to know how we can make the process easier for disadvantaged or vulnerable communities so that they can get help they need. How can nonprofits, the private sector, and state and local governments better serve their communities so FEMA isn't left to pick up the tab? How are they using federal funds already available to them? I hope to hear your input to these questions. I know that coastal communities take care of one another, and while living by the coast can come at a cost, millions of Americans call these communities their home. It is our duty to serve them well and to ensure that they are prepared for whatever could come their way. Thank you again to the witnesses for being here this morning, for your public service, and for serving this great nation. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District, my home. Today, we gather here at Southern University, New Orleans, to discuss the topic so many New Orleanians are very, very familiar with, and that is emergency preparedness. I would like to thank Southern University staff and campus community for hosting today's event. I'd also like to thank our distinguished panel of witnesses here to share your expertise to the subcommittee. I want to thank the subcommittee chair, D'Esposito, for agreeing to hold this hearing in a bipartisan fashion. I want to thank Ranking Member Benny Thompson of the entire Committee of Homeland Security for being here. Thank you both for traveling from your homes so close after the holidays to be here with us for such an important hearing. Today's hearing is to learn more about the challenges and the successes of emergency preparedness in my district. I see in the audience we have a whole host of individuals, and I thank you for being here. I want to particularly recognize the council member whose district we're in, Council Member Eugene Green of District E. Thank you for being here, sir. New Orleans is at ground zero for so much of the conversation on emergency preparedness. Hurricane Katrina was one of the worst natural disasters in recent memory in the United States. Hurricane Katrina was followed by Hurricane Rita just a few weeks later. The hurricanes resulted in loss of life and property damage. In the aftermath of the hurricanes, the response efforts were scrutinized and many policies were changed for the better. There have been many other disasters to hit my district too, including Hurricanes Ike and Ida and the historic floodings of August of 2016. Because of these disasters, we have a better understanding of the importance of federal, state, local, and tribal territorial officials prioritizing emergency resources. Emergency preparedness to ensure that our communities are equipped to respond to disasters quickly and recover with dignity. The threat posed by climate change makes the conversation on preparedness even more important. The effects of climate change are being felt worldwide, which includes more frequent and severe natural disasters like hurricanes, droughts, and wildfires. At the federal level, investment in mitigation strategies have become a priority for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. I am pleased that the Biden-Harris administration has announced nearly $2 billion in grant funding to help communities mitigate the impacts of climate change. Flooding has increasingly become a concern in Louisiana, contributing to the increasing costs of flood insurance policies. Louisianians rely on the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, to offer reasonably priced coverage. However, FEMA's new Risk Rating 2.0 system guts that program and causes great challenges. We'll hear more about that today. Risk Rating 2.0 will result in a 134% average increase in flood insurance costs for single-family homes in Louisiana, phased in over time. This policy will leave many Louisianians vulnerable to extreme weather events because they simply cannot afford to pay these exorbitant costs for flood insurance. Another concern facing my constituents is small business administration loans. Many of my constituents own businesses, and when disasters strike, they have to take out a loan to make the repairs and stay afloat. Unfortunately, some of the small businesses are still paying loans from years and disasters past, while we continue to face additional storms and natural disasters and having to face the struggles of depending on yet another SBA loan. I hope to hear from our witnesses today about how we are working to make sure that flood insurance does not become a luxury that only a few can afford, in ways that we can help small businesses literally stay afloat. Since the terrorist acts of 9/11, emergency preparedness has also included providing federal resources for combating threats and acts of violence. The Department of Homeland Security's Preparedness Grant Program, which includes urban area security initiatives, state homeland security programs, and the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, which helps communities prepare for and address threats. In 2022, Southern University campus in Baton Rouge is one of the many historically black colleges and universities across the country that was targeted with a bomb threat. Making sure that the DHS preparedness grants reach HBCUs and other targeted places is essential. I am proud to advocate for DHS's preparedness grants and hope to hear from our witnesses today on how these programs are helping Louisianians. Lastly, I would like to emphasize, as we continue to face more frequent and severe emergencies, it is becoming increasingly clear that our emergency management systems need to prioritize equity. Vulnerable populations are often hit the hardest by disasters and oftentimes receive disproportionate amount of resources. Building equity into emergency management means ensuring that all individuals and communities have equal access to resources and support before, during, and after the disaster. This not only helps to prevent further harm, but it also strengthens overall resiliency. In May, I joined Ranking Member Thompson as a co-chair of the first ever Congressional Disaster Equity and Building Resilience Caucus. The caucus aims to promote equity and disaster preparedness and response and provide valuable forums to discuss federal policies that impact the underserved communities in the face of disasters. Again, I want to thank Southern University, SUNO, for hosting our witnesses and participating in today's hearing, and my colleagues for making time to be here in my district. With that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on how we can continue to build and support emergency preparedness for all of Louisianians. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I now recognize the Ranking Member of the full committee for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I want to thank Ranking Member Troy Carter for bringing the subcommittee to this congressional district to look at issues regarding emergency preparedness and how the federal government can better support the needs of coastal communities. Ranking Member Carter is a tireless advocate in Washington, D.C. for the people of the 2nd District of Louisiana, and I'm glad to participate in this important hearing. And I also say it's easy to come to New Orleans when you're invited, so I'm glad to be back. I want to thank Chairman D'Esposito for agreeing to hold today's hearing. I know he represents a coastal district on Long Island, New York, and I look forward to a productive discussion on issues of shared interest. I'd also like to express my appreciation to all the witnesses present here today. Finally, I'm pleased to be at Southern University in New Orleans, a prominent historically black university. I'd like to thank the university for hosting this hearing and its staff for their hospitality. As a double HBCU graduate, I'm always happy to come to an HBCU campus. With that said, I want to turn to the topic of today's hearing. Over the years, we've seen more frequent and powerful storms, which have caused billions of dollars in damage. In my home state of Mississippi, each year since 1980, we have averaged about 2.3 disasters crossing the billion-dollar mark. In 2005, both Mississippi and Louisiana were hit by one of the worst natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina, which was then followed by Hurricane Rita. The devastation and the lack of proper emergency response by local, state, and federal officials during these disasters will forever be imprinted in my mind. Thankfully, emergency management has significantly improved since Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, due in no small part to actions taken based on lessons learned from those storms. More recently, tornadoes devastated my home district, tragically killing 22 people. FEMA has been present and ready to help at every step since the tornado, and we are thankful for their assistance. Disasters often hit vulnerable populations the hardest, including low-income communities, rural areas, racial minorities, tribes, individuals with disabilities, seniors, and children. Those with experience in disaster response are well aware of the unequal treatment marginalized communities have received during Hurricane Katrina. I hope to never see people trapped, hungry, and fearing for their lives in the aftermath of a disaster because local, state, and federal officials prioritize one group over another. Fortunately, the Biden administration is doing more to support communities like those in Louisiana and Mississippi, which frequently faced unequal impacts of disasters. For example, it has included equity as one of the main pillars of FEMA's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. The Biden administration has also made long-needed policy changes that increase the accessibility of FEMA's programs, such as expanding allowable ownership documentation to help disaster survivors keep land that has been in the family for generations. As we face more frequent and severe emergency, it is critical that we prioritize equity. The lack of equitable resources during a disaster is appalling, which is why I, along with Representatives Carter, Titus, and Brian Higgins, created the Congressional Disaster Equity and Building Resilience Caucus. The caucus provides a valuable forum to discuss federal policies that impact underserved communities in disasters. I'm eager to hear from our witnesses today on how we can continue to support emergency preparedness for the people of Louisiana. With that, I thank Ranking Member Carter for having us in his district today. I also thank Chairman D'Esposito for holding the hearing and the witnesses for joining us. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.